So my name is James Stauch, Director of the Institute for Community Prosperity at Royal University. I live in Calgary, Alberta, Canada. My community is, my neighborhood is Shaganappy, part of a settler family on my mom's side from Ireland and on my dad's side from northern Germany. Basic income is a way of ensuring fairness and equity in how the resources that belong to all of us in this country are apportioned to all Canadians. It is, in my view, a human right. It may not be formally written into the Charter yet, but the time will come when we look back on extreme poverty, the fact that we have people living in poverty, living without housing, living well below the poverty line. The fact that we have allowed that to happen for so many decades, we'll look back on that in the same way we now smugly look back on child labor and the Industrial Revolution, or the lack of urban sanitation. And it's easy to look back and say, well, that was terrible, and how did society ever cope and manage that? How did we run residential schools a few decades ago? And we look back in horror and shame. We will look back in horror and shame at the kind of poverty we see now. And so basic income is simply catching up to where modernity will take us eventually. So I'm drawn to basic income because we've been doing a lot of work at the Institute looking at future scenarios. Every year we do a scan of what are the trends, the controversies, the sleeper issues that are emerging society-wide. Some of them are economic or political, but some of them are environmental or technological. And if you look at the near future, you don't have to look too far out. The rise of automation, robotics, machine learning, artificial intelligence, genetic editing, we are well ensconced already in a fourth industrial revolution. And that, like all three industrial revolutions that preceded it, will have profound consequences for how we think about social good, how we apportion wealth, what we do with our spare time, who gets to partake in that wealth. And we know already that with these advances, there will be a crisis of having enough work for everyone to do in a conventional sense. There simply won't be. Yes, there will be different jobs, there will be new jobs, lots of new jobs that we can't name or predict right now, but automation will advance. You know, when the 40-hour work week was first proposed, people recoiled in shock, saying, well, that's going to just collapse the economy. And of course, the sky didn't fall when we got $15 an hour minimum wage. Again, the sky has not fallen. It won't fall with things like the carbon tax, and it certainly won't fall with basic income, because what will happen fiscally is we'll be saving money in the healthcare system, we'll be saving money in the justice system, and crime and policing that will more than be offset by the rise in income, because we know having a lack of money is the most important predictor or driver of health outcomes and many other social outcomes. So this is an investment, it's not a cost. Right now we're looking at scenarios into kind of the near or medium term future when we are getting on stream early forms of what we might call artificial general intelligence. So beyond just basic algorithms, beyond the very elementary forms of machine learning, as that technology advances, and it's advancing very quickly, we need to be prepared for what the consequences of that are, and more importantly, we need to get on top of making sure that as that technology develops, that people who are very strongly enmeshed in social good work, people who are dealing with poverty reduction or elimination, people who are working at the front lines of social issues, need to be involved deeply in the development of this technology. It cannot be left to 9 corporations, American and Chinese, worldwide, who are doing the majority of AI development right now. Because the consequences could be quite dire in different scenarios. But there is one scenario, and we've developed 4 different scenarios, but one of the 4 is actually a very hopeful one, where if we properly design machine algorithms and ensure that machines aren't amplifying some of our negative biases, negative flaws, our meaner tendencies as a species, if we make sure that those machines are actually helping amplify what we say and profess we value right across the political spectrum, then we should get outcomes that are quite socially beneficial. So for example, there's no reason to assume that with proper AI development in 30 years, we will not have eradicated homelessness. 20 years ago, if you said we want to get rid of homelessness, that actually would have been a very political thing to say. Most people wouldn't, A, have believed it's possible, but B, it would have been actually seen as a kind of a Marxist, kind of a revolutionary kind of statement. Now, even large companies are totally on board with that, saying, yes, we agree, we need to end homelessness. So things change radically. So in 30 years, if we still have homelessness, we will have failed as a species. We're seeing a convergence between where businesses are seeing the future is going, or the puck is going, and how organizations who are working in socially purposeful work are also seeing business as part of the solutions landscape. It's no panacea. Corporate donations have stayed stagnant for many, many years. However, there have been movements on both the sponsorship front and on certain companies really stepping out and saying, we don't see the future as simply one of profit-seeking and profit-making. You know, you look at somebody like Jeffrey Hollander, who's founded 7 Generation, who said all companies in the future will be socially purposed in order to survive. Those who don't have any kind of societal purpose that they can compellingly make the case for will have a tough time of it. And so a lot of companies are increasingly buying into that for reasons that also have to do with their own prospering and their own thriving. On the student front, we see students coming into the business school who want to do socially purposeful work. They don't necessarily see themselves working for government or working in the nonprofit sector, but they're open to many different options. And they're not coming into the business school increasingly just to have a profit-making business. They're coming in because they see it as a professional setting where they can develop a suite of professional skills that they can apply to making the world a better place. I wouldn't have believed it if I hadn't been working here. And it's true. It's a complete sea change from 10, 20 years ago. You have to be working at multiple levels with basic income. Obviously, it's really important to gain a wide, diverse coalition of supporters across the political spectrum, across many sectors. So at the vanguard, of course, you're going to have social activists and hopefully poverty-reducing nonprofits and poverty-relieving nonprofits. And they all have to get on board, or at least a good quantum of them do. We have to make sure that there's policy innovation as well, good policy design. So we need to engage people who are actually policy wonks, who live and breathe this stuff. Think tanks, university policy schools, and so on need to be part of the conversation, need to be doing research. We also need to engage all political parties, as many political parties as we can. This is an idea that actually came from the conservative part of the spectrum, and whose proponents, including in Canada, strongest proponents have been, in many cases, conservatives. People like Senator Hugh Segal, who may be the #1 expert on this in Canada, certainly from a policymaker perspective. And so we need to engage both conservatives and progressives, because there's appeal on both sides, and there's good arguments on both sides. It could and should save government money, certainly in the long term. It should be able to streamline a host of a patchwork of existing income support programs and other poverty alleviation programs. So that should appeal to conservatives, but on the progressive side, it's about equity, fairness, human rights. It also would unleash, I truly believe, a wave of entrepreneurship. It's the most important thing we can do to encourage people to start businesses. People do not start businesses when they're having to go to the food bank, when they're having to live hand to mouth, when they're in deep debt and relying on payday lending. Those kind of people don't start businesses. You need social stability. And all we need to do is look at the strong social welfare states in Europe, who are also the states where there's high rates of startups, patents, patent registration, all of the measures when you look at commercial entrepreneurship and innovation there's a strong correlation with those countries that have strong social welfare systems and safety nets. I think there's other reasons to support basic income beyond the entrepreneurship lens. I think it allows more flexibility in terms of childcare options. So, I'm all for universal daycare as well, but I think for those who do want to make the choice to be at home, parents who actually do want to exit the workforce for a short period of time and be with their kids at home, basic income can help with that. The other thing it can help with is artists. Artists generally live below the poverty line. The majority do. It is appalling when you look at the average salary of an artist in a city like Calgary that's otherwise prosperous. And we purport to want to be a creative city, which is really important for attracting talent, which is really important for attracting entrepreneurship, innovation, new companies. We should have a strong creative economy, but in order to do that, you need to support artists. And so basic income isn't a magic bullet for that, but it could certainly help. AI specialists are asked, artificial intelligence specialists are asked, well, when are we going to have, when's AI going to be basically usurping human beings in terms of level of intelligence, level of generalized machine learning, and so on? The median estimates are between 2040 and 2050, which is just a couple of decades out. And so we need to lay the framework now for what that looks like. And we can expect such rapid innovation, rapid automation, rapid disruption to the employment market that it will be the equivalent of the first industrial revolution, that basically people emptied out of the country, went to the city, there's massive unemployment, child labor, there is incredible disruption. And without preparing for an equivalent scale of disruption, where you might have a lot of human beings who are deemed to be superfluous, we need to start thinking about how are we going to ensure that people will continue to be prosperous, continue to benefit from economic development, but will do so in a very different way, in a very different set of social norms that are almost impossible to imagine, but we need to start imagining, and we need to start quickly. So basic income is a good idea, and just the start of how creative we need to get.